Welcome to the We Are More podcast. My name is Alyssa.
And my name is Bree. We're two sisters passionate about all things faith and feminism.
We believe that Jesus trusted, respected, and encouraged women to teach and preach his word. And apparently that's controversial.
Get comfy.
Hi, and welcome back to the We Are More podcast. I'm Alyssa, and this is my sister Bree.
Hello, you're welcome.
If you tuned in last time, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed hearing our stories. If you didn't, you should go back and listen to that because we're kind of funny.
We're very clever.
Today we are going to be talking about the forgotten women of the Bible. We're just going to kind of go into a few of them. Let me tell you, there's a shocking amount of them.
There are a lot. I'm looking at that book, and that's a big book.
In my lap is literally a book about
every listed woman in the Bible, pretty much.
And there's just pages upon pages upon pages. So we're going to talk about a few of them today and why their stories are important. And I'm sure this will be an ongoing series that we come back to and go in more in depth with. But yeah, that's a little bit of what we're doing today. So what kind of inspired this for me was today I was listening to a sermon. I looked up, I don't know if you all have heard of Junia in the Bible. If you haven't, she's one that we will definitely touch on, if not today, soon. And I wanted to find a sermon on Junia, and it just didn't exist. Like, all of YouTube, there were some some documentary style pieces. There was one sermon, and it was from this church. I believe it's called Beachfront Church in California.
Which sounds like a beautiful church.
It sounds great. Do you think that their windows just all face the ocean?
If they don't, that's a sin.
God's gonna smite them. Smite! But it was about, and I don't think the pastor was necessarily giving like this strong feminist message or anything like that. But he was just talking about these women that we don't talk about in the Bible. And I'm not a crier. And I was like tearing up because it was just like, oh my gosh, someone's talking about them. I'm hearing the word she in a sermon. Mm-hmm. And that never happens. We hear about Paul and Abraham and Noah and James and John. And I mean, every Sunday, how many sermons have you heard on Paul?
I think it's one of those things, too, that you don't notice until you start hearing the word she. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, that sounds a little abnormal to me in church, in a church setting.
Yeah. Which is heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
You think of how many women are sitting there and they've been erased. Mm-hmm. We've been erased. So I got emotional.
You know, you can weep if you need to.
In my car,
it's
in
okay
the pickup
to have
line.
An emotional moment. I cry literally all the time.
You do. Did you cry today yet?
I think we may have even spoken about this in the last podcast.
How much you
weepy
cry?
I am. Yeah.
You are weepy.
The baby.
So one of the things that Bree and I talked about is, like I said, how little women are spoken about in church. And we talked a little bit about Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. Because Mother's Day is well known as the one time that you maybe hear like Mary preached about, you might hear Eve preached about for a hot minute, but even within that it always comes back to men. Mm-hmm. And it'll be like, well, we'll talk about Mary for a minute, but she's not that interesting. So really what we're going to talk about is,
I think we said something along the lines of like, how can men appreciate the women in their lives or the women in the Bible, and how should they respond from a male perspective on this woman's story rather than like let the woman's story shine.
Right.
Women are important because they're women, or because they are daughters of God.
Yeah, it always has to circle back to how can men respond to this instead of just like, yeah, here's her story. It was amazing. Wasn't she amazing? Mm-hmm. And leave
way
it
to
at
go.
that. Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of that one church service, and it was the sermon on like Jesus and women, and both of us really tensed up. And all of a sudden we like our shoulders dropped, and we like physically you heard like this sigh of when he didn't say like, oh, because you're a woman, here's what you have to do, there's the rules that you have to obey. It was like, you're a woman and Jesus loves you and you are amazing and you were created in the image of God and you are beautiful and wonderful. Drop the mic. That's it.
Mm-hmm. He walked off stage.
Yeah.
Literally the end of this message was he kind of said all of those things, and he said, and that's all I want to say. And then he left. And the congregation, you could tell there was like this...
You were waiting for a but.
Yeah, there was an unease, because I think anytime women are spoken about, you have to bring in the power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Pastors love to tell women, well, yeah, but you're secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but he's in charge of you.
Jesus loves you, but submit to your husband.
Just not as much.
There's always that, like, you're great, but.
Mm-hmm. And I think the whole congregation was waiting for that in different ways. You know, there's people like us that were just absolutely in love with hearing great things about women of the Bible with no caveats. Mm-hmm. And then there were people that were sitting there like, hey, you didn't tell women to submit this time.
Right.
What are you doing?
My wife is gonna lose her mind. Who's gonna make my sandwich?
That's the reality for so many Christian women is your husband is supposed to be in charge. He's supposed to be the leader. And yet, you have to treat him like a tiny baby. Mm-hmm. And it's really annoying and weird. One of the things that the pastor from the Beachy Church...
I don't think you can say that.
The Sandy Church.
Beachfront. No,
Beachy
sounds a little...
They can't see your facial expressions.
Oh.
Someday we'll film this and then you can see her face. It's funny.
And my wrinkles.
I don't know that we'll film that close.
And my haggard appearance.
Maybe they'll see your increasing gray hairs.
That'll be fun. We'll have like a time lapse. How long does it take before she comes all gray?
Depends on how often you dye your hair. But one of the things that the pastor from the Beachfront Church said at the beginning of this really lovely message was that we often relegate the stories of women in the Bible to women's ministry. Mm-hmm. So we only talk about even the main characters, Ruth and Esther, who have literally their own books of the Bible. We don't talk about them in main church. Mm-hmm. We maybe talk about them at like a women's retreat. Mm-hmm. We maybe talk about them in a women's Bible study, but we very strictly don't speak about them in front of men. And he said, he didn't say that's stupid. I'm saying that's stupid. But he said, men, the women of the Bible have something to teach you too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so critical. You know, like, if I have to learn stuff from all the men of the Bible, who, let me tell you, are not perfect men. Like, they're not always great.
I hate to break this to you, but they're not all perfect.
Like, we were talking about this just a little while ago about Joseph, and I'm gonna be honest, Joseph was really annoying.
If you, like, really put him into real life experience, like, he's your little brother. He's a menace.
Oh, yeah.
He's a menace and a stinker.
Well, his father goes to the rest of his brothers and he's like, I like that one the best.
Yeah.
Forget the rest of you.
I'm going to take you on a shopping spree. I'm going to get you nothing. And I'm going to spend all my money on a fancy coat for my precious little boy.
Yeah. Like, of course they hate him.
Yeah.
And then he came to them with his dreams and he's like, you're all going to bow down to me. I hate that kid too.
I know. I'm just thinking of, like, if that was our little brother, I would, Brandon, I'm so sorry, smack you in the face.
But the thing is, like, I think that's okay to say. I'm sure that we're going to get crap for this if people are listening.
I think the story still has value.
It absolutely
but I think if
does.
you put it in real life context, like, make it feel real to you, yeah, he was a little bit of a stinker.
And again, his brothers, they kind of overreacted. They did sell him into slavery.
That may have been a slight overreaction.
Just the littlest bit.
I've never sold you.
That's a positive.
You're welcome. Or Brandon.
We don't know where Brandon is.
But I didn't sell him.
But, like, I think it's okay to talk about Bible characters because they're not characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, talk about the people of the Bible and the real life reality of their situation.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph was an annoying little kid. I mean, that's what he was for a lot of his story. But I can still learn from him. To circle this back to the main point.
Bringing it back around.
As women, like, we can still learn from him.
Mm-hmm.
So the stories of the women of the Bible, and as I'm reading through so many of them, like, they're not all perfect.
Mm-mm.
There's a lot of stuff in
that
here.
is not what we're saying.
But men can still learn from their stories. Perfect, imperfect, whatever it is. So we have to stop relegating their stories to the 5-person women's Bible study that happens on Tuesday nights,
Right. Or a women's retreat where really the goal is embroidery.
Oh.
I've never been on a women's retreat. What do they do?
Someone's going to invite you to a women's retreat now.
Pass.
So I feel like we should start talking about...
What 2 women did you pick, Alyssa? I really like their names.
So our brother, we have a brother, we've referenced him, that we have kept around thus far.
We've kept around. We haven't sold him.
Nope.
Brandon.
So Brandon picked up this book for us called All the Women of the Bible. And first of all, I think that's really cool. We've gotten a lot of support from our family in doing this podcast. And I wasn't sure what the overall reaction would be.
Right.
Because we do come from a very conservative background. Now, they haven't listened to it yet.
Well, we haven't posted
We
it
haven't
yet.
posted it.
As of right now.
So we'll see how that goes. But so far, everyone's been really encouraging and helpful, and I thought it was really sweet of Brandon to get this for us. But it literally, start to finish, lists every single woman referenced in the Bible, even if they weren't named. So, like, this one is Rebecca's mother. One of them is the Great Harlot, which is exciting.
Oh, that's my tattoo.
Hey,
family members, I actually don't have any tattoos.
Pilate's wife, Potiphar's wife. A lot of them are, like, listed as wife or daughter, but they're still in here because even though the authors of that part of the text didn't feel the need to name them,
their story was still significant enough to tell.
Exactly. So I think we'll use this book quite a lot. It's a really helpful reference.
Thanks, Brandy Cakes.
But I picked 2 women that we wanted to talk about today. Actually, I've got like a list of like 7.
Yeah, but you get 2 today.
Oh, bummer. What if we are under time? Can I then go back?
We're not going to be, because I'm going to tell a huge story about Deborah.
You are. I'm very excited about it.
Big Deb.
So the first one I wanted to look at is Puah. Now,
I'm sorry.
Not from Moana, Brianna.
Not
from Moana. Don't sing
copyright. Sorry. Puah.
So, if you've never heard of her, that's okay, because I hadn't heard of her until we were downstairs eating tacos and I was researching for this. But she, along with another woman named Shifrah, and if I am butchering these pronunciations, someone who speaks ancient Aramaic will have to come yell at me.
Oh, I like that word, Aramaic.
Thank you.
Wow.
I took a Bible class once.
You are very learned.
Thank you. So anyway, these 2 women, they were Hebrew midwives in Egypt right around when Moses was about to be born. And so the Pharaoh at the time, if you don't know the story, had basically said, all right, we're going to kill all of the Hebrew baby boys. And I literally hate even saying that. I have a little boy and it just shatters everything in my soul to put that into reality and think of what these mothers and fathers were dealing with.
Yeah, making the Bible real to you is a little bit traumatizing.
It is, especially, I mean, the early Bible, the Old Testament is rough. So anyway, they were midwives. And the Pharaoh had ordered all of the Hebrew baby boys killed. And so what he ordered specifically Puah and Shifrah to do, because they were midwives, he said, all right, when you get there, when the mom is having the baby, look at it first. And if it's a boy, kill it. And if it's a girl, let it live. And, I mean, first of all, can you imagine getting that order from the Pharaoh? I mean, this is the king. Like, you gotta be scared of him, right? Mm-hmm. These midwives, I can't imagine the midwives are being called to Pharaoh a whole lot.
Their whole job is to bring babies into the world, and he's telling them to take them out. Mm-hmm. That's insane.
Well, and they're Hebrew, so they're already, like, in slavery. They're already dealing with all that. And now what? And, I mean, you gotta think, too, if you do what Pharaoh says, maybe he'll give you money. Maybe he'll free your family. So there's a lot of conflict there. Mm-hmm. But what these two women did was basically not do it. They believed in God. They wanted to follow God, and they said, we're not doing this. We know that God's promises are on their way, so we're not doing this. And Pharaoh caught on, as you do.
You heard it through the grapevine?
He did, probably.
I won't sing that song either.
Please don't.
Copyright.
Mm. And he called them again, and he was like, hey, what's going on? Baby boy just running down the street.
I thought I told you.
And they said, I love this lie. Okay, so the lie that they came up with, and did they plan it? Was this just...
Obviously not.
Puah was like, words are coming out of my mouth.
And there's no filter.
And they said,
my life.
No, Pharaoh, you don't understand. These Hebrew women, they're built different. We get there, baby's already shot out.
One good push and whoa!
The Egyptian women, it takes them all day, but the Hebrew women, they're strong. They just push them out. And the Bible doesn't say how Pharaoh responded to that. Like, I mean, he was a man. At this time, men were not present for birth. Mm-hmm. Maybe he didn't know.
He didn't know where they came from.
Maybe not. So it doesn't say how Pharaoh reacted to that, but he didn't kill him.
Mm-hmm. He didn't quite catch on.
No, so they, went their own way, and God blessed them and gave them families of their own. Now, that didn't fix the whole situation. Mm-hmm. Pharaoh still went after the baby boys again, and successfully the next time, unfortunately. But I thought that this story was so impactful, because so much of the Old Testament is death. It's just a lot of death.
And a lot of names I can't pronounce.
Yeah, a lot of that too. That's in the New Testament too.
Yeah.
But these women brought life. Mm-hmm. They literally potentially saved the Hebrew population. Like, when you really pull it into context, if they hadn't done what they did, potentially an entire generation of Jewish men would not have existed. Which leads to King David, which leads to Jesus. So what they did is save God's people so that Jesus could be born and save humanity.
Right. Ooh, Puah.
Get it? And Shifrah. We can't forget her.
Oh, Shifrah.
She's important too. But Puah is more fun to say. And if you're wondering where this is in the Bible, because I think it's important to references, it's Exodus 1:15 through 21. And they are named. Both of them are named, which I think is very cool. Mm-hmm. And they're just so impactful. And I literally had never heard of these women before.
I literally did not know that Puah was a biblical name. Okay, in Beth Allison Barr's book, where she's talking about the surrounded by a cloud of female witnesses. Mm-hmm. You're always going to have a Puah by you.
I'm okay with that.
Surrounded by a cloud of female witnesses, including Puah.
I just think it's really cool to, bring light to these women that, I mean, if you polled the whole world right now, there's somebody talking about Paul in the whole world. There's somebody talking about
Peter, James, John,
exactly.
Matthew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many people are talking about these women?
Definitely not Puah.
You have to get over the name.
Let's just take a minute and thank you, Puah.
But
And Shifrah.
It's just an incredible impact. And I think you could do a whole sermon, even though it's 6 verses. It's not a lot.
People have done a sermon on a lot less, I would say.
Do you want me to do my other woman before you do Deborah?
Well, I think Deborah's going to take us out with a bang. So maybe you should just continue.
All right.
Or maybe... Never mind. I was going to say take us out with a tin steak. But it wasn't even Deborah.
It wasn't Deborah, but it was... Yeah.
We're going out with a hammer.
All right, so the next woman I have affectionately named Salami. I think it's pronounced Salome, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't know.
But I'm gonna be honest, I'm more accustomed to salami.
All right, Salami it is. Again, the people that speak Aramaic, they can come for us.
You're so learned.
Bree, if only you had gone to chapel in college like 4 times.
I took a religion class.
1.
I do not remember Puah.
I had to take 4. Puah was not in our religion classes.
I think I took 1 member.
We had to take biblical hermeneutics.
I don't even know. Is that anything to do with the harmonica?
Yeah. We just played the harmonica and said
and
biblical
hymns?
over and over. And then Old Testament and New Testament. Oh, there was another one too. I don't remember what it was.
You guys were a little bit more religious than
like
school.
2 whole years more religious.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Salami. She was the wife of Zebedee. She was also the mother of James and John, who were some of the disciples. And it's thought that she might have been the sister of Mary, Jesus' mother. I think that's unconfirmed, but it's kind of a theory. So she may have also been Jesus' aunt. So we'll talk about this a lot over time, but there was a group of women that followed Jesus along with the disciples. Like, came with him everywhere he went, climbed up the mountains, got in the boats, sat in the crowd while he was preaching, all the stuff. And learning that on its own was like world changing for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, groundbreaking.
Because that's just never ever spoken about.
I'm just thinking about like the flannel graphs like at church.
Yeah.
And you just have, your 12 disciples and your man. That's what's like my internal picture.
Yeah. But there were a lot of women, and they're talked about in the Bible. It's not like we're making this up or they've disappeared or anything. They're definitely in the Bible and spoken about. And she was one of them. So imagine her walking alongside, as Jesus is feeding the 5,000 in the Garden of Gethsemane. And, all these major moments, women are there too. And I think that's really cool. She also helped Mary Magdalene bring spices to the tomb of Jesus. She was there when Jesus returned after he had died. And he told these women, like, hey, I'm back.
Guess who's back?
I'm sure you can't do that.
Back again.
And so she also went to the male disciples and told them what they had seen. And of course, as the story goes, they didn't believe them and Jesus had to come back and prove it. But I think she's super interesting. Her character is really interesting because she went to Jesus. And I had always heard this story told as James and John went to Jesus and said, hey, we want to sit at your right and left hand sides in heaven. Turns out it was her.
She was being bold.
She was a mom. Now, you can fault her for that, for sure.
She was being human.
But she was being human. And she was going to Jesus, whose message, like, she was trying to understand, but you have to remember that, like, this is all very new to them. Jesus' ministry wasn't that long. So this is very new to them still. And she wants the best for her kids. And so she goes up to them and she says, hey, can they sit on your left and right side? And I just picture them, like, hiding behind her, like, clothes, like, peeking around. We're like, Jesus, can we please? Mom said.
Someone's gonna get mad at you for that.
It's okay. But that's just sort of what, you bring humanity into it. And that's what I picture is just, like, they're kind of standing cowering behind her. Because they want this question to be asked. But they asked their mom to do it. Mm-hmm.
But also, that shows the incredible faith that she had for Jesus. Not knowing all of the stuff that, like, we know that now and what he's gone through and whatever, like, she believed he's going to be up there in heaven. And I want my kids to be up there too.
Well, and think about, when Jesus went and chose his disciples, we kind of picture him just, like, walking around town, pointing at people and being like, you and you and you. And he picked both of her sons. Now, I don't know how many kids she has. It doesn't say. But Jesus was going to take 2 of her sons with him. And instead of being like, that's a bummer. Or, well, good luck. Here's a packed lunch. She picked up her life. She said,
like, me too.
Yeah, she said, bye friends, bye house. I'm going to go live a pauper's life and follow around this guy that I don't know a whole lot about. That's incredible.
That's incredible.
And to do that as a woman who was not going to be appreciated for it, not going to be celebrated for it.
She's not going to have her own book of the Bible.
No, her name isn't known. For some people it is. I'm not saying no one's ever heard of her, but
I think a lot of people have heard the name salami.
Yes.
It goes good with, a charcuterie board.
Brie makes a nice salami rose.
Yes. I've seen a TikTok.
Proud of you. And I just think that's really cool. I think, she is one of many of the women that follow Jesus around faithfully with the disciples, with Jesus, and that Jesus valued just as much. Because he wouldn't have let them come along. He would have said, no, you stay. You can do work here, whatever, but stay here. But he didn't do that.
Your job is best at home.
Right. Like, that was never said to these women.
No, it was like, come, follow me. I'll teach you how to be fishers of men.
And women.
And I wish that I was a fisher of men. In a different context. I'll cut that part out.
Alright, that's all I have. I have a list of 7 other women, so we can go into them later. Let's hear about Deb.
Let's hear about the story of Big Deborah. So, Deborah, I just thought was really funny because I never really thought about it as a biblical name. Like, Debbie. Debbie doesn't sound biblical to me.
I'm gonna guess no one ever called her Debbie.
I am now. Deborah and Jael. You can find their stories in Judges chapters 4 and 5. But pretty much, have you ever heard of, like, the Gen Z version of the Bible that's been going around right now?
They have their own version? I want a version.
Yeah. But with their slang words.
Oh, no.
Essentially, it's what I created here. So, let's get into it. The beginning. Okay, the Israelites are crying out to the Lord for help. They're saying, help us, we want to be free, help us. Deborah was leading the Israelites at the time between Ramah and Bethel, who were 2 men. So I think it's pretty significant that she was up there also leading Israel.
Also in the middle.
In the middle. Yeah, sandwiched in between.
But, like, the middle is kind of the most important. If you think of thrones, you put the king in the middle, the queen and the princess on the side.
You're so right.
Sorry. Get back into your Gen Z flow.
Let me get back into this flow. Ramah means hill or height, and Bethel means house of God. Deborah means bee, like a buzz buzz. Like she's putting in the work.
You go, Deb.
Deborah was a judge, so the Israelites would go to her to have their disputes reconciled and taken care of, whatever. But Deborah was also, I believe, like a prophet.
Yeah.
So she was trying to set Israel free from the Canaanites, so she told this guy Barak, not our president.
It's not currently our president anyway.
a different Barak, that she said the Lord said to take an army up to Mount Tabor.
Girl, do I look like I speak all the languages?
You keep saying something about Aramaic. I don't know.
We'll title this episode Aramaic.
Take the army up to Mount Tabor and she'll lead the enemy to him, or something along those lines, and that will help set the Israelites free. But this guy Barak was like, pass. No, thank you. He's like, I'll go if you go, B, but I also won't go if you don't go. That's what the Bible says.
The Bible says that word for word?
No, but similar. So she said, fine, I'll go, but because you're not trusting God the way that you should, the honor of this will not be yours. It will actually be to a woman. And so Barak was like, bet.
No. You're a millennial. Stop that.
So Barak went into battle with 10,000 men, and most likely also women. And Deborah, our main bee,
yes,
was right alongside him. She was a warrior.
Proud of her.
Yes. And in chapter 4, verse 14, it said, then Deborah said to Barak, go! This is the day the Lord has given you. Go!
Yeah.
She says some other things too, but Barak's like, okay. So lots of events happen. There's lots of names.
Judges is full of a
unclear to
lot
me.
of names.
But Barak was pursuing the enemy, and he was taking them out with the Lord's help, obviously. But this is one guy named Sisera. Alyssa, you looked it up. It was, Sisera is the suppliant commander.
Yes, for the Canaanite army. I don't know 100% what that means.
Okay.
But he was part of the Canaanite army.
So he ran off on foot, and he stumbles upon Jael's tent.
Also a woman.
Also a woman. And she was the wife of Heber the Kenite. Okay, here's where I have no idea what I'm saying with the names. Who can pronounce those? But there was some kind of alliance between him and that family, so he felt safe with Jael, and he's like, hide me, woman! And so she's like, come in here, come be safe, I will hide you. And then she like hides him under this blanket. She's like, be safe. Tap, tap. And he's like, okay, woman, I'm thirsty. I've been fighting all day. Get me some drink, wench. So she gets him a drink, and then she tucks him back safely under the blanket and gives him a little pat, pat, you're safe. And he's like, go and guard the door. Guard the door.
Obviously.
Because I'm scared. And she's like, don't worry about it. And he's like, if anyone asks if, like, I'm around here, tell them I'm not here. Lie to them. And she's like, okay, I will. Wink, wink, like a big wink. And he falls asleep. Of course he did.
Idiot.
He's an idiot, and he could probably pass out anywhere. And meanwhile, he's sleeping. She grabs a tent stake and a hammer. And she thump, 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 drives it into his temple and kills him.
Did he wake up halfway through this?
Girl, I don't know. The Bible doesn't say that. But it does say a hammer and a tent stake. Imagine that.
No, thank you.
And so then Barak comes back around and he's like, hey, have you seen Sisera? And she's like, oh, you know what? I think I did see him. Come over here. I think I'll bring you to him. Come here. And they go into her tent, and he's there with a tent stake. Oh, I choked. In his head! Ow!
I just want to understand. She didn't feel the need to explain to Barak that, like, yeah, I murdered him. He did.
You'd think she would be all, like, high on energy or something.
Nope, she's chill.
She's just like, oh, yeah, I'll show you.
This is at least the fifth person she's staked.
She was actually a serial killer. But then, so, yay, Jael killed that guy, and that ultimately led to liberation of Israel from the Canaanites. And at the end, in chapter 5, Deborah, Big Deb, our main B, and Barak celebrate in a big musical number.
The Bible's big on musical numbers.
Lots of musical numbers. And that's the story of Deborah and Jael.
When we get to heaven, can we ask them to perform it for us?
Yes, can you do the play, please?
We'd like to see it.
Do you have that tent stake with you?
Didn't you say, too, that it's like one of the hymns?
Oh, when I was reading, because you said that it ended in some kind of song, so I'm like looking for the song before I got to chapter 5, obviously, where it's nothing but a song. But in verse 14, when she's like, go, this is the day that the Lord has given you, it reminded me of the hymn, like, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it.
But how cool.
How cool.
Their story is very cool.
I mean, you think about the women that are preached about, and they are not preached as, like, warriors and strong fighters, killers, judges. Like, they are intense. But women in churches now are told to be, like, mild-mannered and soft and meat. But
Just
that's
be quiet
obviously
and sit in the corner.
Not what God is calling us to be.
Well, it's not... I mean, I read a lot of these women, and I'll read more. Not one of them that was celebrated was quiet, mild-mannered, just serving her husband and doing nothing else.
Staying in her lane.
None of them. They were strong. And honestly, even culturally, they had to be strong. It was a patriarchal society, but they were going through some stuff.
They were putting in the work.
Yeah. And you look at these women, and why had we never heard of them?
Just, like, reading her story, I could just, like, hear all of, like, the drum beats of the war and all of that in my head. I'm like, wow, these are powerful women, and I did not know this story before.
Well, and think about, like you said, that pastors have done sermons on less than 6 verses. This isn't 6 verses. This is, like, a full chapter, two chapters in Judges. And, I mean, I would guess that a huge part of our audience will have never heard of either of these women.
Well, maybe the pastors aren't putting it in their sermons because they can't pronounce all the names that are mentioned. That's because I edited out almost all of them.
Deborah is pretty easy.
Big Deb.
Big Deb. They could just start calling her Debbie, and then it would be fine.
It'd be fine. They'd be like, oh yeah, we have a Debbie in our congregation.
She's right over there.
Debbie's like, this isn't about me.
Even, like we said, the major women of the Bible you hear so rarely about. And people like Bathsheba, you'll hear her mentioned in David's story. She's like a side character, and we'll do a whole thing on her, because I have words. But she's treated like...
I have words. Yeah, we're on a podcast. You have nothing but words.
I have a lot of words. But she's treated pretty badly in history. I mean, really, she's treated like she's the one that screwed up David's life, and without her, he would have been just fine. When really, that's not at all the story. And like I said, we'll come to that. But as Bathsheba's life went on, she had huge influence. Like, she ruled alongside David and had major influence over the Israelite people. We're not talking about that. That's not even part of her story that we reference. I hate that.
Yeah.
Because she turned really a very tragic life into power, authority, influence for God.
She took those lemons and she said, I'm making sorbet.
Yes, in the desert. She made some of that.
Can you imagine how delicious that would be?
In the desert?
Yeah. She made sorbet.
But I think we just need to talk about these women, whether they're powerful and strong and warriors, or whether they are, like we talked earlier about Lot's wife. She's held up as very much if you don't know the story of Lot and his wife, Lot was living in Sodom and Gomorrah, which was this horrible, sinful town, right? And I don't know what they were doing. I don't want to know. Bad stuff.
Think about that, like, island in Pinocchio. I assume.
Yeah.
A lot worse.
And Lot came, I read about this today. Lot came from somewhere else into Sodom and Gomorrah. So he wasn't, like, that's not where his family was, that's not where his home was, whatever. Lot's wife was from there. That's where she grew up. That's where her family was. That's where her whole life was, right? And God told Lot, I'm going to destroy this city. It's so sinful. I'm going to destroy it. Much like the flood.
Mm-hmm.
Old Testament is rough.
Wrathful God. Let's take it out.
And so they flee. And God tells them, don't look back. She does. And so she gets turned into a pillar of salt, which is a unique punishment.
I'm thinking Anna from Frozen, but salt.
Yeah, that's... we hold her up as this pillar of sin. Of sin and not having faith in God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, we just takes the humanity out of it.
Mm-hmm.
She was a person. She did not grow up believing in the Israelite God. We don't know what her religious situation was. The Israelite God wouldn't have been as impactful to her as it would be for someone like Lot. And who actually was a terrible person in general. But of course she looked back.
Mm-hmm.
Her whole family.
Her whole life.
Of course she looked back. And was that sinful? Sure. Did she get punished for it? Obviously. But she was a person.
Mm-hmm.
And we really like to especially take women and any flaws that they have, turn them into villains in the Bible.
Magnify it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Bathsheba. Look at her. Look at Job's wife. We don't do it to the men. We like to forget about their sins and to forgive them, but the women we eternally punish.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk about them. We'll talk about their stories.
Yeah. And I think putting it into like real life context, like you said, like that was her home that she grew up in her whole life, her family. Like think about that in your situation, your home with all your pictures and all your memories and all your kids and all your family members, and it's being destroyed. Mm-hmm. Would you look back?
And I mean, the story doesn't say the woman stopped, turned, and ran back towards the flames. Mm-mm. She just glanced over her shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Probably with tears in her eyes because she's terrified. Right. And she became soaked.
She did.
So yeah, moving forward, let us know what kind of women in the Bible that you want to know about. Some people or stories that you're interested in. Remember, we're learning alongside you, so
give us grace.
Give us grace. That's not a song. I made that one up.
But this has been fun. I've really liked looking into these women.
Yeah. You can pretend that this is a women's retreat if you want. We can embroider.
I think it's gotten too late at night. Guys, it's 8:42 and that's 42 minutes past our bedtime. So after this, Bree's gonna do some embroidery and then we're gonna go to bed.
Love you, bye.